Si ustedes trancan la vía democrática, nosotros no sabemos lo que pueda pasar en este país. Venezuela es una bomba que en cualquier momento puede explotar.
Let me ask you about what's going on in Venezuela, Doctor. I mean, you've seen these protests, riots. There's video that we got to Fox. It showed people collecting and eating out of garbage cans. A lot of folks have looked at that and said, you know, that could happen here. It could get off the wheels fast here. What do you think?
Well, I think on the way there, we basically go through Greece. But Venezuela is about to collapse. There's no way of getting around it. The fundamentals are falling apart, and at some point there's going to be a revolt internally there as far as I can visualize it.
We're in a bubble. We have artificially low interest rates. We're soon going to be at 20 trillion. According to the economists, who I'm not big believers in, but nevertheless, this is what they're saying, that 24 trillion, we're very close. That's the point of no return. $24 trillion. We have a stock market that is so bloated. Be careful of a bubble, because what you've seen in the past might be small potatoes compared to what happens.
Today, we're seeing signs that the 35-year bond bull market has ended. If this is true, it will prove to be a huge event, not only for the United States economy, but for the world economy as well.
When Puerto Rico missed a $58 million debt payment August 3rd, it hit the islanders hard. That's because the territory owed most of that money to its residents, who invested in their government's bonds. Many expected it. The real shock came in June. After 10 years of mounting debts and double-digit unemployment, the governor said Puerto Rico couldn't pay back a debt that had swelled to $73 billion.
Puerto Rico needs, and I propose today, a complete and comprehensive restructuring and development plan that is not short-term, but long-term, and is definitive for the immense problem that we face today.
Okay, so how bad is it going to be?
It's going to be awful, but you know.
He says, how much worse? Because since we saw you last, we got a jobs report that some people will say was terrible.
Do you guys remember the financial crisis of 2008? Did you think that was bad?
Yes.
Yeah, this is going to be worse. Now, but it's not necessarily going to be concentrated in the stock market. See, I think that the government, the Federal Reserve, their main goal is to make sure that the stock market doesn't collapse again, to make sure that the real estate market doesn't collapse again. And they may succeed, but only by sacrificing the dollar. And so we're going to a currency crisis. And this crisis is going to be much bigger than a financial crisis. The impact it's going to have on the average American, on his standard of living, on his way of life, is going to be much more profound. And sure, people won't lose as much money in their stock portfolio, but if they try to sell their stocks and spend the money, the purchasing power that they lose is going to be much greater than what was lost in 08. And of course, 08 gave way to a huge comeback in 2009. So we got saved. We're not going to have that kind of reprieve again.
Friday financial freakout, specifically foreign banks. Take a look at names like Royal Bank of Scotland, Barclays, Banco Santander out of Spain, Deutsche Bank, all are moving down 6%. So here's what we've got. The markets woke up this morning. Look, decided it was time to panic about three things that have actually been out there, folks. So I just want to be clear about that. The three things: the Fed meeting next week, the vote 2 weeks from now in the UK on whether Britain should extricate itself from the European Union trade bloc, and global GDP fears, meaning, oh, are we worried that GDP output, gross domestic product, will start plummeting in a lot of countries? But it's bond yields around the world that are cracking. So this statement, if this isn't drama rolled into massive superlative wrapped in fear, I don't know what is. But let's call it a major warning from the top market player, Bond King Bill Gross of Janus Capital, tweeting out, global yields lowest in 500 years of recorded history. $10 trillion of negative rate bonds. This is a supernova that will explode one day. In fact, look, we wanted to put this together for you. You may not own German boons or UK gilts, which is the bond in the United Kingdom, but they are dropping precipitously. In fact, Germany's 10-year fell about 42%. It's about to go negative. You've got the UK 10-year bond called the gilt hitting a record low going back to the early 90s. And, of course, the 10-year Japanese government yield's already negative. Folks, that means that people are paying the government to hold their money just for the promise of getting some of it back.
And we begin with that breaking news. Walmart announces it's going to close 269 stores worldwide, 154 of them in the United States. Among them, 3 Sam's Club warehouse stores in our area will be closing. That's Seekonk, Warwick, and Fall River. It is going to impact 10,000 workers in this country.
The Sam's Club closures are 3 of 269 store closures worldwide in the Walmart family. Customers like Arthur Outland tell us they're disappointed.
I've been a Sam's Club member for years, so I just love coming here.
We've learned 16,000 associates will be affected worldwide. 10,000 of those are here in the U.S. Walmart says it hopes to relocate many of the affected employees to nearby stores. If that's not possible, the company says it will give associates 60 days of pay with severance packages for some employees. The CEO of Walmart released a statement saying, in part, closing stores is never an easy decision, but it is necessary to keep the company strong and positioned for the future.
Tensions have risen in Venezuela since the government of President Nicolás Maduro issued several decrees to save energy. The extraordinary measures include 4-hour rolling blackouts and imposing a 2-day work week. The president says the blackouts are an emergency measure. Water levels at the dam that provides 75% of the country's electricity are at record lows due to a severe drought caused by the El Niño weather pattern. The 2-day work week is already disrupting life for many.
Venía a mi cita de pasaporte.
Edgar Febrero learned the hard way when he tried to renew his passport. No government employees.
Decepcionado.
I'm disappointed and angry, he says. They're systematically destroying the country. Daily life for the average Venezuelan goes well beyond inconveniences.
We've seen food shortages, medicine shortages, now basic services, electricity, even water, that is not reaching a big portion of Venezuela's population.
Add to that the highest inflation rate in the world, which has made the bolivar, the local currency, lose 98% of its value on the black market since Maduro took office in 2013.
Joining us right now is former Texas Congressman and former Republican presidential candidate himself, Ron Paul. Sir, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Well, we've been all eager to talk with you this morning on Fed Day. Of course, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates today as the president-elect's policies are expected to trigger some economic growth. What's your take on the Federal Reserve coming out today saying they will, in fact, raise interest rates?
Well, everybody expects it, so it won't be news. The big news would be if they didn't do it. That would be a shocker. But, my position on central economic planning is I don't like it. I don't like it when one person can do it, and that's the chairman of the Federal Reserve. But everybody hangs on it because they have to. But, yes, they're going to raise interest rates, and they may do it once or twice later on. But I think the big news is what the report you just gave. Sales were down, the prices were up. Right. That's what's coming. It already exists. That's why people are so unhappy. That's why they're demanding increases in the minimum wage, and that's why people have 2 jobs. But this is a story. Everybody forgot about the 1970s, but we're moving into that era. I think we're going to see a lot more price inflation. I think you're going to see a weak economy. I think it's totally out of control. The Fed, central economic fails. And if you just look at what's happened since the beginning of this century, we've had, the NASDAQ, the housing bubble, and we've had this failure of just printing tons of money that didn't work. And now they're going to go to spending money, and they don't even hardly talk about the debt.
Well, I think you make a really good point. Yeah, because the retail sales number was way weaker than expected. We were expecting up 0.3%. It's up 0.1%. Meanwhile, inflation has risen because that was up 0.4% on the producer price index. Do you think that changes with new fiscal policy coming from President Trump once he's in office? Lower taxes and spending on infrastructure and a rollback of regulations. Does that even things out?
No, I think it'll make it worse. because the government's spending the money and you don't have the market determining what's happening. So yes, they're going to, the money that they've created since 08 and 09 is sitting around. Now it's going to start moving in, and velocity is going to pick up, and it'll be out of control. I mean, can you imagine? You know, maybe the price of concrete's going to skyrocket. You know, they're going to build new roads and new bridges, and copper is liable to go up because of this. So I think prices are going to go up, and the money's going to be spent according to political reasons and not because of business decisions. So we want the government out of it. We want people to save money, create capital, but capital cannot come from the Federal Reserve working with a computer. That's the fallacy, and that's why zero rates of interest didn't work, because they weren't realistic. People know it, and now they say, well, how do we move back to it? Well, it's not easy to move back, because what you want to do is get out of the way and let the market work. But we do not work on a free market principle. We do not have sound money. It's all manipulated, and we have one person making these decisions, and I think it's way too much power for the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board to have so much power, and I think people are starting to realize this. You know, when I started talking about this, you know, people, well, what's this thing about the Federal Reserve? But just think in the last 6, 8 years, people say, hey, you know, they kept the interest rates too low too long. Obviously they did. And they didn't do a good job in getting us out of the recession. So now the Fed is throwing up their hands and they say, it's up to Congress. You know, they need to spend money. And they'll print and the Fed will accommodate. They will print the money when the debt goes up, because there will be a limit to how much these interest rates will be allowed to go up. Because just think of the consequence of rising interest rates on the cost of our debt. Billions and billions of dollars. If interest rates to the government goes up 1%, you're talking about big time increase in the deficit, because we'll be paying interest.
Right, Congressman, you bring up some great points here, especially because the Fed does have $4 trillion on their balance sheet. They undertook unprecedented monetary actions, but now we're starting to see a new regime come in. You've got actually President-elect Trump going to be nominating at least 2 people to be Fed board governors. You've also have the chairperson is going to be leaving probably at the end of 2017. So is there a little confidence that you're having on the new administration to rein in the Fed and actually have government pull back a lot of their government waste, given the fact that he's having business people come in that have talked about having smaller departments, smaller government?
Yeah, I do have a little bit of hope. I don't have any hope for the Federal Reserve, because they're incapable of doing something that they don't know how to do. They don't know what the interest rate should be. But if you say they're there for the purpose of reining in the Fed, that's very good. I have a lot more hope in the area, not on fiscal policy. That's a big negative. But the idea of lowering taxes is great. But if you lower taxes and not cut spending, I mean, this administration plans to massively increase infrastructure spending. And for some reason, they think that we just, even though we spend as much money as 7 other countries for our military, they want to increase it. We have to rebuild it. We have to have a strong military. Well, you know, that's just more Keynesian. You know, the other day they mentioned about cutting, and Trump correctly said, maybe we ought to cut the F-35, which is a worthless airplane. It billions, as a matter of fact, into trillions of dollars. It's built in 45 states, and what will it do for jobs? Well, that's Keynesianism. You spend money for jobs. So the Republicans are just as guilty at Keynesian intervention as are the liberals who do it domestically and say, well, it's up to the government to create these jobs. No, it's up to the market to create these jobs. It's up to the government to give us a free market, low taxes and less regulations, and some of that Trump is advocating. And along with Maria's prediction and telling people to buy stocks, we've had a fantastic time. So I think we have to give Maria a lot of credit for this stock market thing, because she called it correctly in the middle of the night.
Thank you, Congressman. That's right. I saw you in the green room that night, and we were, you know what, when the market was down 800 points on election night, I just couldn't understand why people were upset given his economic plan. I thought lower taxes and rollback of regulations, that's a beautiful thing for earnings. I want to buy this market with both hands.
Well, very good. Did a good job.
Also, congrats on Liberty Report actually getting 60,000 followers. I think that's a great thing, so congratulations on that.
Well, thank you very much. We have fun doing it, and people are watching.
And they sure are. You're really resonating. Congressman, it's good to see you again. Thanks so much for the time this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Congressman Ron Paul.
The price of gold soared after the Brexit vote as people rushed to secure safer assets. But the price of silver has grown by a much greater degree, making it an attractive option as well. Here's why.
Jewelry stores have many customers coming in to buy pure silver these days.
금값이 오르고 해서 대표님 얘기를 들어보니까 상당히 투자 가치가 있어서 오늘 같은 날 하나 정도 사고 가려고 왔습니다.
Per kilogram, the price of silver bars surged from around $500 early this year to more than $800 this month. Banks are also receiving many inquiries about silver bars.
실버바가 좀 있나요? 원자재 중에는 가장 매력적인 투자 수단으로 저희가 이제 많이 판매를 하고 있고요.
As more and more people are trying to secure safe assets following the Brexit vote, international prices of gold rose by about 8%, whereas prices of silver have surged nearly 20%. The value of silver has soared because ordinary investors rushed to buy it. It's cheaper than gold, and the demand for silver is high from various industries such as China's solar power industry.
금 같은 경우는 그동안 금 대비 지나치게 저평가됐다는 인식에 금보다 더 높은 가격 상승률을 기록하고 있는 상황입니다.
However, caution is needed when investing in silver because its prices are more sensitive to market conditions than gold.
"抢手的商，在北京专门销售马年金饰的柜台前被挤得水泄不通。
我属马，
您属马的才能低买
啊？
挑着有合适的吗？
看见了，那个什么看都看不见，人太多了。
陈小姐一大早就来到商场，刚刚买到了心仪的商品。
挑给爸爸妈妈的礼物啊，
是买的什么？
马年的项坠啊，就过年嘛，也是让老人开心一下，乐一乐。
商场工作人员介绍，目前正值春节长假期间，国内黄金商品交易所都已经停牌。黄金零售价格在去年最后一次调整后，到现在一直都没有变，都是每克302块钱，相对来说还维持在较低的水平。
最近几天呢，黄金价格有所上涨，但是呢，我们的饰品的零售价格没有调整。过节了，也愿意给顾客多一些，实惠，所以这个时候顾客买还是比较合适的。
由于国内金价还维持在低位，投资金条销售也很不错。
现在金价呢比以前就是便宜很多了，去年都是300多块钱，现在都是200多块钱嘛，做一些投资是挺好的。
而这种热销也直接使黄金首饰相关企业的生产出现了井喷。
现在我们包装车间是非常繁忙的时候，今年我们的订单呢比上一年这个按同比呢大概增长30%左右。
中国的消费者的投资渠道相对比较少，在这种情况下呢，就更愿意把钱拿出来。但是我觉得这种现象呢，是一种富民强国，长经益民，民富国才能强。我觉得是对国家、对老百姓、对消费者都是好事。
That all seems pretty scary. However, this is going to happen, and you can only play the hand that you're dealt. But the great news is that gold and silver always end up doing an accounting of the expansion of the currency supplies. Basically, the will of the public and the free markets. When governments do this kind of stuff to their currency supply, they debase it. Eventually, it comes back in inflation. People sense the loss of their purchasing power. They rush back to gold and silver, and they bid the value of the gold and silver up in the country until it meets or exceeds the value of all the currency in circulation. This is a process that's been going on over and over again throughout history, except this time it's happening on a global scale. It has never before happened in all countries at once. And that means that this is the greatest wealth transfer in history. Therefore, it's the greatest opportunity in history, and it's not going to happen again in your lifetime.